Hello, good morning, everybody. Lots of people joining. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this World Challenge training session, again, designed specifically for our initiative partners. Today, I am very, very excited that we are hosting a session on facilitating an impactful initiative for young travellers. So for lots of you, this is the second training session you've joined us on in the last couple of weeks. So the way we're going to start, I'm going to go through the housekeeping as I did last time. And then I'm very, very excited that we are joined by our Product and Operations Director, Stuart Morris, today, who is going to facilitate our session. So at the moment you are all on mute, so you can have your cameras on if you'd like to. We'd love to see your faces, but you are all on mute. So if you'd like to ask your questions, and we would highly recommend that you ask questions. We want this session to be useful and valuable to you all. So really it is, again, a space for us to learn and grow together. So please do feel free to ask your questions throughout the session in the chat boxes, and there might be opportunities to open your mics as well and speak to us directly. There are no such thing as silly questions. If you have a question, chances are other people also have that question, so please feel free to ask it. We're hoping that the session is going to be just under an hour, probably. Stuart's going to run through the session and then we'll answer all your questions at the end. Same as last time, we're also going to record the session. So for any of your colleagues that weren't able to be here today live, I'm going to host the session on YouTube. So please feel free to use it with your team for your own training purposes. And again, if any questions pop up afterwards, please feel free to come back to us as well. So without further ado, I'm going to pass over to Stuart. Thank you so much for being here with us today, Stu.
Can I just check, can you see my screen now? I've shared my screen.
Can.
Perfect.
You haven't.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us, as Emma said. Just to quickly introduce myself, as Emma said, I'm the Operations and Product Director at World Challenge. I've been working with World Challenge for just over 20 years now. I know I don't look old enough for that, but I promise you I started about 20 years ago. And when I joined World Challenge, I started in a sort of junior apprentice type role, and I worked in our kit store, and I was folding tents and straightening tent pegs and that sort of thing. And after my first year, I had an opportunity to go on an expedition to India. So I went for 4 weeks on an expedition to the Indian Himalaya. And I was 21, 22 years old, something like that. And it was a life-changing experience for me. It was a 4-week trip. It was a huge learning curve, huge adventure. We did 2 weeks trekking at high altitude, and then we did a community initiative at a local school in northern India, and it was very impactful for me. And you know, I learned as much and took as much from the experience as the young people on the trip. And from that point onwards, I've not looked back. And I've been on to lead lots of different expeditions, and then I became ops director about 10 years ago now. And you know, I feel really proud and privileged to be part of a team that are creating such powerful experiences. And really great to have you guys join us today. The initiative is a really key part of the itinerary, the World Challenge itinerary, and one which most of the students are really looking forward to and focused on. And it's great that you guys are showing your commitment to being here and helping to make those experiences as impactful as possible. So in terms of what we're going to cover today, I'm going to talk a little bit about the students that we have travelling with us, so who they are and what their objectives are and what some of the school objectives are. And then we're going to talk a little bit about student leadership and what that means and why it matters and what that looks like practically on the trip. And then we're going to have a look at some of the challenges of keeping young people engaged, and you might have experienced some of these. And we can talk about some top tips for how we can sort of plan and facilitate the activities and structure the activities so that we can keep young people engaged. and then there'll be an opportunity at the end for any questions. As Emma said, you're on mute. I can see a couple of cameras, but not many. So if you want to turn your cameras on, don't be shy. Please do that. And as we go through, there aren't loads of us on the call. So if you want to just unmute and ask a question, then I'm very happy for you to do that as we go. And there will be a couple of times where I've got some questions for you. So I want to get a little bit of feedback about your experience of either working with our groups or other groups of young people. So when that opportunity comes up, please do speak up if you have something to add. So let's start by talking a little bit about the students that travel with World Challenge. So we have a full age range between the of 12 and 18 years old. And, with such a range of ages, they're at different stages of development, both physically and emotionally. And as we go through this session, we'll sort of identify that different age groups require a different approach in order to maintain their engagement. They're dealing with different challenges, and so we have to sort of structure things in a different way depending on the age. You're probably aware that we don't sort of tend to have that full age range in one group. So you might have a group of 12 and 13-year-olds, or 14 and 15-year-olds, or 16 and 17-year-olds. They tend to be similar year groups, but in some groups there can be a spread of age. So worth being aware of that. And some of the obvious things, younger students tend to be more energetic and they need more structure and guidance, whereas the older students tend to be a bit more independent and they're sort of there and curious about developing their leadership skills and those sorts of things. So we'll continue to look at some of those differences as we move through. We have students that come from all different types of backgrounds. So we've got students from private schools, we've got students from government schools, and we do have some students that come from special educational needs schools. And we have, there are lots of students these days that are that have neurodiversity. And what I mean by that is students whose brains work a bit differently. And so you may be familiar with conditions like ADHD or autism, dyslexia, those sorts of things. So, in our range of students, you may have students that are that have those conditions. And one thing that we have noticed in the travellers that go with us now is that there is an increased number of students that are living with mental health challenges. And that could be anything from, mild anxiety and depression, stress related to exams or home life or any of those sorts of things. So it's worth being aware that students may be coming to us with these mental health challenges that they're living with. What does it mean having this sort of diverse range of students? It just means that we have to be flexible in our approach. So when we're planning activities and structuring the itinerary for the initiative, we have to make sure that we can be flexible and adapt that to the needs of the individuals within the group when we get to learn about them. So in essence, it's not, we can't take one model and apply it and expect it to work for every group. We have to plan to be flexible and adapt when we start to see how the group react and, the different individuals that we've got in the group. One thing that I would add is that our trips are an opt-in trip. So students apply to go on the trip. Not many of them are compulsory trips that are, dictated by the school. And because they're opt-in, most students are therefore coming with a certain level of engagement and commitment to the trip. That said, we do know that some students will be travelling because they're pressured to be there by their parents, or they're going because their friends want to be there. So there will be some students that are there with different levels of engagement. And one tip that I would sort of ask you to do before the groups come is to make sure that you start by checking the student ages. So before they arrive, you can check the student age, and that will start to get you thinking about how you might want to tailor the experience that you've planned. So if you've got a younger group coming, you can start to adapt some of the activities that you've planned accordingly. So what are the aims and objectives of the students? So opportunity for one or two of you guys to speak up now. Think about some of the groups that you've hosted in the past, groups of young people. What do you think motivates them to join these types of trips? Why do you think that they're on the trip? Anybody happy to unmute and shout out an answer? Got lots of different students coming. Yeah, go on. I can see it going. Yeah.
To expose them to outside of their culture, to give them the different experience in a different culture.
Exactly, yeah. So experience new cultures, something that's different from home, absolutely. Any other ideas from anyone? Let me share with you what I've got down here. So the school aims, schools are looking for lots of different, will go on a World Challenge trip for lots of different reasons. They might be looking to develop leadership skills in the students, to be able to build global citizenship, and that's linked to the point there about culture, exposing to new cultures and understanding what the world around them is like and their place in the world. Building teamwork and collaboration, so getting the students working together, and solving problems together. And essentially, most schools are organising these trips to enable students to prepare themselves for their future goals, whether that means higher education and or moving into their work lives in the future. So that hopefully the skills that they learn and character that they build on the trip are skills and characters that will benefit them in the future. What about the students? Well, students do want to come for personal growth. They want to develop confidence and independence. So, for some younger students, 12 or 13-year-olds, this might be their first trip away from family for any extended time. And so for them, it'll be about starting to build that independence and some confidence. Whereas older students, if you're 17 years old, you might have been away a bit before. We do have some students that are at international schools where they travel a lot anyway. And for them, it might be more about developing some of those interpersonal skills around resilience and leadership. Experiencing new cultures, we've talked about that, really important for people. And ultimately, for some students, they see it as an opportunity to enhance their application for university or higher education. So having been on a meaningful, impactful trip like World Challenge is something that stands out for people as something different, when they're applying to go to universities. So people will be coming to the trip with lots of different aims and objectives. And really what that leads on to is I wanted to talk a little bit about comfort zones. And this is a model that you may be familiar with, but just to explain it, each of us have different size comfort zones depending on the activity or the thing that we are focused on. So, if we talk about that example of people being away from home and being away from family and friends, those that have never done it before will have quite a small comfort zone and they'll feel pretty stretched straight away when they go on the trip. And those that are international students that travel all over the world all the time will have a much bigger comfort zone. And we use this model to sort of talk about how we create learning opportunities for students. And when you're in your comfort zone, you feel safe and comfortable, but actually not much learning takes place in that space. But when we push people and we stretch them outside of their comfort zone, that's when they begin to learn. And so a World Challenge trip is about stretching people and challenging people so that they learn and develop. You can see there's a small band that says stress, and stress is an indicator that the level of challenge is becoming too great. And at that point, as adult supervisors, leaders, initiative partners, trekking guides, whoever it is that's involved in that part of the trip, it's our role to step in and do something so that the level of challenge doesn't become too great. Because if it does, we then end up in this panic zone, and that's where there is a risk to harming the young people from a mental or physical perspective. So our role as leaders, is to temper the level of challenge on the trip so that we are encouraging that opportunity to learn, but not overstretching the students or pushing them too hard for too long so that it becomes a negative experience. So not sure how many will shout out again here, but let's see. Can anybody think of any challenges that the team will face on their trip? What sort of challenges will they be dealing with? Feel free to unmute and just shout out. No, there's no wrong answers.
Let me try my mic. Can you?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So, having lead World Challenge before, or having being a local guide, yeah, I mean, you see a lot of sometimes a student who are going out of their comfort zone. So, for example, like even the food,
Yes.
The sleeping area, accommodations and all that, and then even interacting with with the people itself, like for example, interacting with the native people and all that. So usually they will have a big doubt, sometimes unsure, and yeah, it's just yeah, basically something that quite strange for of being in a new experience. Yeah.
Definitely, yeah. So absolutely, eating different foods. People will be anxious about that before the trip and, anxious when they're on the trip, meeting new people, communicating with local people. These are all challenges that will be in their mind and things that will stretch some of the students more so than others. And sometimes you mentioned the comfort and, perhaps sleeping in a tent or sleeping in a classroom or whatever they might be doing. That might even be a stretch for some of the teachers. So we're presenting lots of different experiences here. Yeah. So some of the others, homesickness, you may have seen that or can imagine that, on some of the longer trips. There are physical challenges on the trip. So they'll be doing a physical activity of some sort on the trip, but then there's also climatic differences. So it might be much warmer than they're used to. New foods and cultural differences we've talked about. Group dynamics and conflicts. So, they're going to be living with the same group of people for 2 or 3 weeks on their trip, and they're not used to that at home. They get to, after school, they get to go home and do their own thing, and now they're with the same group of people for the whole time, and that can create issues, within the group. And that's linked to, lack of personal space and lack of creature comforts. So the challenges don't always have to be, climbing to the top of the mountain or carrying heavy things around. There are lots of, mental challenges and emotional challenges as well as physical challenges that the groups will face. And that's great because it means there's lots of opportunity for the students to learn, because when they deal with these challenges, they think about it and they process it, and then they, in the future, when they face a similar challenge, they have some experience to draw from. So just to reiterate, as leaders and facilitators, our role is to monitor the level of challenge, observe the group, push them out of their comfort zone. But if we see that they're starting to become stressed or the level of challenge is becoming too great, it's then being dynamic and adapting things, changing things so that we bring them back down into something that's more comfortable. And last thing I'd add about this is it's important to stretch the students, but then come back to a comfortable space so that they can recover and they can reflect on what they've done in that sort of comfortable environment. Great. So let's move on. We've talked a little bit about the students and their aims and objectives and the challenges that they'll face on the trip and why that's relevant. And now let's start to look a little bit at student leadership and how that works on the trip and why it's important. And, you know, having a clear understanding of this will help you plan the itinerary for the initiative and the tasks that you build into that experience. So why does student leadership matter? Well, it's central to the World Challenge ethos. Okay, so we believe that when you empower students to take ownership of their own trip, they develop really important skills like confidence and resilience and the ability to make decisions and take accountability. So it prepares students, as I said earlier, for their future, for future academic endeavours or for professional goals that they might have. And, you know, what are the other benefits? Students learn to sort of take responsibility for their actions and their decisions. They start to work together as a group and collaborate and, you know, understand about sort of compromise and trust and important group skills like that. And it gets them to think differently. It gets them to problem solve, all really useful things. And, you know, the student leadership will apply differently for different age groups. So if you've got younger students, you know, 12, 13 years old, their sort of experience of exploring leadership might be more basic. Okay, so they might be, you know, dealing with organizing simple tasks or delegating tasks to people in the group and understanding how that works. Older students, 15, 16, 17 years old, you know, they're looking to grasp more advanced elements of leadership. So things like dealing with group dynamic issues and solving conflict in the group. And so again, as leaders, and you know that there'll be a World Challenge expedition leader and some teachers with the group, the expedition leader will be hopefully know the group more and have got to know them and understand the individuals in the group, and there'll be an opportunity for you to talk to them to understand the different people that you're dealing with and what their specific aims and objectives are. So what does it look like in practice? You know, it's important, as I say, to meet with those other adult leaders when the group arrives. So you should always plan to do that because they will have spent some time with the group already. It might be early in the trip, but they will have spent time at the school with the students and pre-departure training with the students. So the teachers and the leaders will have a much better understanding of the individuals in the group. So plan some time to have a chat to those leaders and try and find out a bit about the groups that you've got and the individuals in that group. And then together you can sort of figure out how you want to approach providing leadership opportunities for the students during the initiative. So the expedition leader is sort of, it's their responsibility to be the main facilitator. So we are charging them with the responsibility of helping the students to identify things that they've learned and, you know, how those things are important in the future. But it's important that as initiative partners, you assist in that by helping to create the stage, if you like, for some of that learning to take place in the most effective way. So it really does need to be a collaborative thing between yourselves and the leaders of the trip. So in terms of student leadership in practice, you may be familiar with this already, but we do like to have the leader of the day, and this is the student leader of the day. It's a key part of our sort of ethos and our model, and essentially each student will take an opportunity during the trip to take leadership of their group and of the itinerary. Now, depending on the length of the trip, this could be leader for a day, or it could be leader for half the day if it's a shorter trip, or it could be that you've got two students that are co-leading together and supporting each other. Now, for some students, being the leader of the day will be one of the biggest challenges of the trip, one of the things they're most worried about. And that, you know, when we think back to the comfort zones model, they'll be feeling pretty stretched by being put as that person of responsibility. What do you think some of the what do you think that student leader of the day should be doing? What is their role and responsibility, do you think? What are some of the things that they might be doing?
They will be providing informations of the of the activity.
Yeah.
Yeah, they will be also maybe somebody's assigned to look at the logistics, accommodations, and maybe they can be an accountant as well.
Yeah, perfect. So, you know, some of the sort of general responsibilities, they might be looking at the plan for the day and briefing the group and assigning tasks. You know, they might be doing timekeeping. They might be making sure that people are up on time and at meal times on time, and they might be helping out with meal preparation and things like that. We also want them to act as a liaison and a communicator with the local people at the initiative, because that really helps to reinforce you know, the importance of their role and the sort of responsibility that they're taking on. You mentioned some of the other roles that we've got there, so they will hopefully have other people in the team that are taking on different roles, and some of them are up on the slide here. So there might be an accountant or someone that's taking responsibility for safety, you know, chefs, people that are taking care of people's well-being. There are lots of different roles, and you know, the purpose of that is so that we can encourage as many students in the group to have active participation in what we're doing, not just sitting back and blending into the background, but actually being involved and taking some responsibility, and again, encouraging opportunities for learning and growth. So again, depending on the age group, we have to think about, you know, how much responsibility we give to the students. So this is something that the expedition leaders and teachers will be taking a lead on. You know, remembering the comfort zones. If we try and give too much responsibility too soon to a younger group of students, it will fail. Okay, they will struggle too much and it will become a negative experience. So a younger group is going to need more structure to start with, and you know, they might be involved in some simpler tasks like helping to organize supplies for a meal or something like that. Older groups, you know, with more experience might straight away be able to take responsibility for planning the whole day and all the intricacies of what's going on. So again, we do want to encourage student leadership, but we need to think about the age of the students we've got, and that will help us to understand, you know, how much support and guidance to give and how much sort of to step back and give responsibility to the students. I've been fortunate enough on the trips that I've led to see this in action many times, and some of you will have too. I remember one student on one of my trips to Borneo, a girl called Laura, early on in the trip. She was quite demotivated. She wanted to give up. We were on a trek. She just wanted to go and wait back at the accommodation. It was hot. It was hard. It was sweaty. We were dirty. There were leeches. We were sleeping in the jungle. And it was very challenging. And she found it particularly difficult. And actually, she was asking, she wanted to leave the trek. She wanted to go back. And as a leader, and with the teachers, we had to think about this very carefully. And I could have easily said, yeah, go and sit back at the accommodation and have a rest, and we'll see you at the end of the trek. But I knew that I was going to take from her the opportunity to develop some confidence and some resilience. So we supported her and we pushed her and enabled her to continue with the trek. And she got through it, and she actually realized that she was capable of much more than she thought she was. And as we got to the later parts of the trip, she actually really came into her own, and she was one of the strongest people in the group. She ended up then supporting others and helping others that were struggling, and she became a really strong leader on later parts of the trip. So I saw that change in the space of a couple of weeks. This was a 4-week trip, but I saw that change over a couple of weeks, and it was very powerful to see. And we'll see lots of examples of that when we're leading groups on these experiences. So what is the role of the expedition leader and your role during this experience? What do you think your role is? What, you know, following what we're talking on, what's your guys' role during the initiative? Any thoughts? Let's jump in. I've got some ideas. I'll put some things up on the slide here. Your role is, there's obviously some preparatory work that you're going to do to plan for the arrival of the group. But when the group's actually there, we want you guys and the leaders to guide the students and not direct them. And there's a bit of a balance to that. So there's some things that are going to need direction and instruction. So specific information about you know, the tasks or the work that they're doing. When it comes to safety, you know, we are quite direct. So we want to make sure that we're not allowing people to make mistakes from a safety perspective. But as much as we can, we ought to be trying to guide and prompt people and allowing students to make their own decisions. And sometimes making those decisions as students also means making mistakes. And it's okay for the students to make mistakes as long as it doesn't have a bigger, wider impact on, you know, the success of the initiative or on the budget or on safety. So we can think about that. And if we see students, you know, struggling with something, we don't want to dive in and solve the problem for them and tell them, well, this is the best way to do it. Instead, we can prompt them with guiding questions. So how might we approach that differently? Or is this working well? Is there another way that we could do it? And encourage the students to think and discuss and come up with ideas. So we want you to be, you know, guides and facilitators as opposed to directors. As I said earlier, we want you and the leaders to work collaboratively together, but we want you to engage the student leader. So again, it might sort of feel more normal to go to the adult leaders if there are issues or things that you want to discuss or brief people about for the day. The default might be go to the adult leaders. As much as possible, we want you to liaise with the student leader of the day and encourage them to sort of own that role as leader. Of course, there will be some things that you will want to discuss with the adult leaders, but I'd encourage you to try and do that more discreetly, so that you don't undermine the student leader's role. And some of the things that you might be discussing with the expedition leader will be things about, you know, as I said before, who are the individuals in the group? What are their needs? How is it going? Do we need to change the plan? Should we do more of this? Should we do less of that? And that is working together with those people, with the expedition leaders. But when it comes to actually, you know, the external communication, as much as possible, we want to encourage you to do that with the student leader. I think it's important to provide feedback. So we should, students want to make progress and they want to achieve things. And so there ought to be opportunities to acknowledge that. So built into that structure, there should be opportunities to recognise the progress that's been made, provide some feedback and encourage students to continue with the good work that they're doing. Be dynamic. I mentioned that right from the start. So you may see that the group's not coping as well or not engaged with what you've planned, and you have to be prepared to have a plan B, change to something else, speak to the expedition leader, make a new plan and introduce something that just changes the energy and hopefully re-engages the students. And then create opportunities is really about opportunities to learn, and that's linked to all the things we've talked about. So the challenges that will push the students and give them opportunities to learn. So one sort of key summary and takeaway from that is the role of the adult leaders on the trip and the initiative partners is to strike that balance between supporting the students and guiding the students and offering them the space to lead themselves and to learn and to grow. I know that from having led lots of trips, it's sometimes difficult when you see the students doing something ineffectively. You would do it differently. There's a better way to do it. It's hard sometimes not to jump in. You want to be helpful. You want them to be successful. But I always want you to think, by doing that, am I taking away an opportunity for them to figure it out for themselves? Because when they do figure it out for themselves, it's a much more powerful experience for them and more memorable and lasting impact. So how do we keep young people engaged? You know, as we talked about before, we're dealing with lots of different types of students, and with that comes different challenges of keeping them engaged and structuring activities and things like that. Some students will be on the trip for different reasons. So some will be really focused on the trek or on the adventurous activities, and that's why they've come on the trip. And then others will be there because they're really interested in learning about the culture and they're really focused on the initiative that's being planned. And so we're going to be dealing with different challenges as we've identified. And so with that, there's different opportunities to engage the students. So what are some of the challenges that you may have experienced? Students, particularly younger ones, have a short attention span. You know, there can be dips in energy. So, you know, like I said earlier, they may be tired, they may be on a different time zone, they might not be eating as much, they might not be sleeping as well. And so that can create sort of energy dips, or they might be doing physical activities. So later in the day, they're feeling tired and there's, you know, a dip in energy. Different levels of interest and enthusiasm, as I've said. And then we talked a little bit earlier about some of the cultural and language barriers that might create some challenges of engagement with the students. This can affect the group morale and it can affect productivity on the initiative. You know, students might get bored or lose interest and lose focus. That could create some dynamic issues within the group. So these are all things that we might see during the initiative, and I see it as a leader and different parts of the trip. You know, and it's important to sort of identify that this is normal. So we are dealing with young people, and it's normal for them to be disengaged or get bored or have short attention spans and all that sort of stuff. So we mustn't be too harsh on ourselves and think that we've got it wrong or we've planned it wrong. It's just a sign that we need to change something, introduce something different, or change the plan a little bit to try and re-engage people. So we should be looking out for this. Are the students engaged? Are they all participating? Are they all involved? If not, what should we do differently? So let's have a quick look now at some of the solutions and some of the ideas that I've got about keeping students engaged. And then as we go through and at the end, if you've got other ideas and thoughts, really great to hear those and for you to share them. So I've got 10 practical tips. We'll go through them all, and I'm sure Emma will send this deck out after the session. So and it's being recorded, so don't worry too much about writing things down. These are just some ideas. So keep the activities short and varied. So based on that sort of short attention span, you know, if we plan activities that are lasting a couple of hours, people are going to lose interest and focus. So I would aim to sort of plan sessions that are 30 to 45 minutes, or tasks that are 30 to 45 minutes, and then break it up with something else and then go back to another task or go on to a different task. So think about the length of the tasks that you're planning and sort of try and balance the focus on the task with other things that mix up the energy, which could be, cultural interactions and exchanges or other things that we'll come on to discuss. Hands-on activities are always really engaging for students. So there'll be some students that are more academically focused, and there'll be some that are more active focused, that want to be getting their hands dirty and doing things. And students, young people, really like to see an outcome. They like to see a progress. They like to see that they've contributed something and achieved something. So any opportunity that you can build in for them to get hands-on and physical will help with that engagement. It's good to build in some competition. I've put friendly competition because we don't want to cause conflict in the group by people taking the competition too seriously, but you can turn some of the tasks to have a element of competition. So, let's see how many saplings we can plant in the next 20 minutes, or let's see, you each got a bag, you're on a litter picking exercise, let's see how much litter you can get in your bag in the next 10 minutes, and let's measure the results at the end. Some sort of competition will, with some groups, encourage that participation and give them something engaging to focus on. I think it's important to rotate the roles and responsibilities. So it's good to have a variety of different tasks and things that people can focus on, and then create an opportunity that they can rotate around those. And that doesn't necessarily need to be all tasks that are focused on the initiative. It could be that you've got some people planting trees, some people preparing food, some people, getting the materials ready or tools ready or things like that. Identify the different things that people can be focused on, and then going back to the first point about keeping activities short and varied, have a system where people can move around different activities and different responsibilities to keep that sort of variety going. Adapt to the energy levels. So we've talked a little bit about this. It may be that in the morning, when people have got more energy after breakfast, we might sort of plan more physical activities and more sort of challenging activities. And later on in the day, it might be that it's definitely going to get warmer and they're going to have less energy. And so we might plan something that's a little lighter weight, or we might build in some, cultural experiences in the afternoon. So think about the energy levels and think about how you can tailor those activities to suit people's energy levels. Games and energizers. These are just ways to sort of break up, the tasks and the initiative, giving people something fun to do. Just sometimes even just a short 10 or 15 minutes team game or something like that will help the students to sort of re-engage, have a bit of fun, have some laughter, and then be prepared to go back in and focus on a task. Now, the expedition leaders will have lots of ideas of games and energizers that they can run with the group. You might have some yourself, which is great. There might be some local games that the students haven't done before or been part of, and that could be really interesting. But the point is that you should expect to have to build in opportunities to stop work, stop focus, stop learning, and let's do something fun, and let's break it up and sort of create a different type of energy for a short period of time, and something that you should collaborate with the expedition leaders on if you want support in building in some of those sort of team games and energizers. I've talked a couple of times about cultural elements. We know that most of our students are really curious and interested about learning about your culture in the destination that they're traveling to. So any opportunity that you can build in for cultural exchange will be well received. It's a good opportunity, as I say, to break up the tasks and move on to different focuses. Examples could be pairing the students up with local peers to focus on activities, or I know that some of you build in cooking classes or traditional games, or whatever the case may be. Any sort of cultural exposure is really important and really valuable. Connect to your mission. I think particularly for younger groups, it can sometimes be hard for them to sort of grasp new concepts around your mission for the initiative. So it's really important to sort of use simple language. So, one example might be, you might be an organization that promotes sustainable agriculture. Well, that might not mean very much to a 13-year-old student. And so we have to think of a way to explain it that they can connect with. So we might instead say, we help farmers grow food in a way that protects the soil for the future generations. And that's something that's just in a slightly simpler language. It means the same thing, but the students can connect to. So if you've got a young group coming and you're wanting them to connect to your mission, think about how you're going to explain what it is you do in language that they can understand. And wherever possible, demonstrate. So students want to see things in action. So wherever there's an opportunity to demonstrate your mission, then you should do that, as opposed to sort of talking conceptually about it. Now, I think that, in fact, I know Liz Tuck, who heads up our product team, is actually delivering a session on how to deliver a world-class briefing and how to connect students to your mission. And that's going to be happening in January, towards the end of January, on the 22nd. So Liz will talk more about that. I think it's a really interesting subject. So if you have the time and the opportunity, we'd encourage you to join that session too in January. That'll be a really interesting session. Last two, recognise and celebrate progress. I talked about that earlier. Really important to sort of celebrate those small wins and sort of boost morale in the group and motivation by helping the students to identify what progress they've made and how great it is. Linked to that is building opportunities for reflection. Well, it'll be the expedition leader's role, and you may have seen this on initiatives in the past, that the groups will have review sessions. They might be at the end of the day, or it could be at lunchtime, at the start of the initiative, or at the end. They might sit down as a group and have a discussion about the things that they've done and what they've learned and what that means for the future. They might be using some sort of creative review technique. They might be doing personal journaling, or they might be doing a role play of some sort. And the focus is about identifying what they've learned that day or during that activity, and why it's important and how it can be applied in the future. So the expedition leaders will take the lead on that, but I think it's a really nice opportunity, if that is happening, for you guys to be a part of that, observe it, join in, so you can sort of gauge what it is that the students have found valuable, the things that they've found challenging, and it will help you learn a little bit more about the group as they go through that itinerary at the initiative. So I think it's important in the itinerary to build in opportunities and time for some sort of reflection, so that students can sort of connect with what it is that they're doing and why. Okay, so I've run through 10 practical tips there. That's the end of the content that I've got to talk about. I will open up the floor to any questions. If you've got any questions, please unmute and shout them out, and I'll do my best to answer.
Thank you so much, Stu. I have a few questions that I mentioned had come in before, so I'll just pause for a second and see if anyone else would like to ask any before I start with the ones that we've received.
No problem.
Maybe we'll start with mine, Stu.
Let's hear yours. Yeah, let's hear yours.
Yeah, so one question that came to me before from a partner that isn't able to be here today, Stu, is about sports. So what they found this year in particular was that the groups really loved breaking up their tasks and their work, playing sports with the local community and the children of similar ages. What they struggled with, what their challenge was to then get their attention again to move on to something else. So they really loved that part. They were playing sports. But what should they do there? Their question, Stu, is if the students are really enjoying that, should they let them carry on? Should they just make that the afternoon's activity? Is it important that they do move on to the tasks at hand? And if so, how should they go about sort of redirecting their energy and their attention?
Yeah, good question. I think it really depends on the circumstance. If I was the initiative host in that experience, I would be discussing that with the expedition leader and the teachers, and I'd be trying to understand what their expectations are for that afternoon, and that they may say, look, the group's been really struggling, they're feeling a bit low, maybe we should just let them carry on playing football for the afternoon, and that will really lift them up, and it'll be really engaging, and they're sort of having a cultural exchange which is really valuable, and they may support that. But they may also say, look, happy for that to let them play for a little bit, but we would like them to get back to the tasks that we're focused on, because we really want them to start working together more, and they've not been very good with their time management, and that's something that we want to focus on. So I think it really depends. It's something to discuss with the teachers and the leaders, and it will depend on how the group is coping, what their energy levels are like, how much there is to do, what stage of the initiative they're at. Both could be the right answer. It just depends. Hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you. And then another one, Stu. So this is more for me and listening to your session today. So you talked about comfort zones and sort of that comfort and then that stress. I'd love to better understand if there are signals or things that we should be looking out for. What are the signs of stress that we should sort of be looking out for? And on the flip side, what are the signs of the team being too comfortable and not being stretched enough?
Good question. I think in terms of people being too comfortable, when people are comfortable, they're relaxed, they're laughing, they're joking, they're taking their time, things are on their own pace, they're not particularly focused, they're sort of milling around, those sorts of things. I think it should be fairly easy to spot when people are comfortable and in their comfort zone. You then stretch people. When people start to become stressed, you might see things that you would expect to see of anybody that's stressed in any context. So you might see people getting irritable, people withdrawing from the group, perhaps getting emotional. Those sorts of things would be signs of stress. Impatience, snapping at each other, conflict, those sorts of things are an indication that it's stressful. And there's a fine balance. It's not binary. Some people will be in their stretch zone and others in the group might be feeling stressed. And so it's not then always about changing the activity, because the activity is pitched right for some of the people. It's about how you support those individuals that are feeling stressed. So it may be that you have to support one or two individuals more so than others to make sure that activity remains positive and valuable and stretching. But then there's sometimes times where you can notice that the group as a whole are starting to become stressed. Okay, and perhaps now we've been doing this activity for too long, or it's becoming too challenging, and now it's time to put something in place to change the activity and reduce the level of challenge.
Brilliant. Thank you, Stu. Has anyone got any questions that they wanted to open their mic and ask, or put in the chat box as well if you'd rather?
I might just Oh, go on. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the thing that always or sometimes pops out during the expeditions is that with the local leader, sometimes I mean most of the time when they know who the student leader is, and when all the information is communicated to them, and when the it's the when the information is delivered by the by the student leader, sometimes it does not appear to be like what the what we wanting that the information to be conveyed. I mean, it's not like a full informations that perhaps very clear to everyone, because it sometimes it does happen like that it leave the group, the team, to be like still um questionings and still unsure of what happening. What should we do when when something like this it is occurring, I mean, with the team?
Yeah, good question. I think there's an opportunity. Let's say you've briefed the student leader, and now they are delivering a brief to the rest of the group. And you believe they haven't communicated all the information, and that the group have questions. You could, in that situation, encourage the rest of the group to ask their questions, but ask the questions of the student leader. And if it's something that you've discussed with the student leader, it may well prompt them to think, oh, yes, we did talk about that. I forgot to mention it. I'll answer that question. If they're able to answer some of the questions that their group have, then that's really quite powerful, because it does show that they're taking responsibility and ownership. It may be that there's some important things that might relate to safety, for example, that haven't been mentioned. And you could start by prompting the student leader and saying, right, are there any particular safety things that you want to brief the group about that we might not have discussed already? And they might then have a rethink, and they might remember some of those things and introduce them, and they might cover off the things that you're thinking about, in which case, perfect. If after that they still don't cover the bits that you need, it's okay to then add some things in to enhance their briefing and cover those bits off. So it's the difference between jumping straight in and filling in the gaps for them. Rather than do that, create an opportunity and prompt them, get the group to prompt them and you prompt them, so they've got another opportunity to add a few more bits in. Okay.
Thank you, student.
No worries. I might just say, Emma, because I know we're running out of time, I just wanted to summarize 3 key things just for the end of the session. Well, firstly, I wanted to thank everybody for giving up their time, for their engagement, and for your contributions. Your role in delivering these initiatives is really valuable, and it's really great to see you all here and interested and passionate about learning and making these experiences as good as they can be. 3 key things to think about. Remember to understand the students that are coming to you. So find out what age group they are, and in the early stages, work with the adult leaders, immerse yourself with the groups and try and understand who they are, what their needs are, what their aims and objectives and challenges are, so that you can tailor the activities and things accordingly. Remember to empower their leadership, give them opportunities to take responsibility, make decisions, and keep them engaged through thoughtful planning of the activities and the tasks, and being dynamic and flexible, and mixing it up with opportunities for rest, play, fun, cultural interaction, and mixing it up and rotating those things. And thank you very much. And if you've got more questions and things, you can reach out through Emma or the rest of the team, and we will, of course, do our best to answer them.
Thank you so much, Stu. Thank you so much. So much learning, so many valuable points and practical tips and things for us to really take away as well. So yeah, thank you to you, Stu, for making the time to be here. We really appreciate it. And as Stu said, thank you to everyone who's joined us. Yeah, we really appreciate you taking the time and learning with us and growing with us. So please do ask any questions that come up after this session. You can ask them to me, as Stu said, and I'll make sure they get back to Stu. And yeah, we can learn together. So yeah, thank you very much, Stu, and thank you everyone for being here.
No worries. Take care.